Welcome to Coleman Report Live. I'm Bob Coleman. We're talking Main Street and the small business lenders who help it grow. Lance, thanks for joining us. Katie Roach out of the Pacific Northwest. John, American banker, community bank is still your expertise. John, I appreciate you giving up your Thursdays and joining us. It's been an interesting couple of months, John.
Yes. It's culminated an interesting couple of days, and it's still. Yeah.
Lance, what's going on with these new forms?
Well, SBA, of course, released the SOP 5010-6, and as a result of that, some of the forms needed tweaking. They updated the SBA Form 1919 and 1920 to bring them compliant with the SOP 5010-6. They improved the 1971, which is a religious affiliation form, to make it easier to understand and simpler to complete. And then they made a couple of small tweaks. The 2237 is a form you submit if you have a servicing action like changing the loan amount or changing the guarantee percentage after approval. They tweaked it just a little bit to make it compliant as well. No huge, well, there's some changes to both the 1919 and the 1920. These forms were effective 2 days ago. So if a loan walks into your institution today, these are the forms you'll be using when submitting it to SBA. We had this discussion yesterday, and I'd just say, if you had a project you're working on and you had a borrower who completed, the only form this is relevant on is the 1919. A borrower who completed the 1919, signed and dated it prior to November 3rd, you should still be able to use that. I would encourage you to consider the possibility of getting it on the new form, but I think you could still use the previous form on ones that were signed and dated prior to November 3rd. And we're going to do a webinar next week to go over the changes and how to complete the forms and talking about the importance of this information off the 1919 and 1920 migrating into your credit memorandum.
Katie, I know you've been going through these as well, and it is possible, Katie, that we could have a new form, say the new form, the 1920, which is the lender's certifications, and the old form, the 1919, which is the borrower information form, correct?
Correct. Yeah, hopefully we'll see more information about that in the coming days, but I think Lance is going to have a great webinar. I love watching it, and he's really going to work us through the entire process and everything. So it's going to be a great webinar.
Our resident nerd, SOP nerd. So
I like forms and I like the SOPs.
Hey, let's go to the poll questions, and I want to talk to John about what's going on in Washington. Did your loan volume, now this is for fiscal year, the government year, increase, decrease, remain the same?
And do not include PPP in this amount. Because everybody would
Good point.
Bob, I think everybody would have an increase with PPP in there.
John, how do those numbers look compare with your reporting?
I think it's spot on, because if you take the overall number, which was $22.5 billion for 7A, conventional 7A for fiscal 20, it was down 2.7%, which I'm surprised it performed as well as it did. I know that the payments SBA was making helped it along, but it showed just a modest decline. So that seems to sort of track.
And we'll talk. John wrote a nice article the other day. 504, same question. John, what do you think the answers are going to be on this one?
I would presume here that most people increased, because that program increased fairly significantly.
And the interest rates are very, very attractive. Lance, what's your vote?
I'm on the increase, Bob, because the 504
you looked at the answers.
Yeah, but the 504 debenture rate for 504 projects and refis it has been incredible all year long. So it's a very attractive product.
I put this in, this is the third one, is obviously we like top line revenues, but we still need to make sure we're making money to pay all our salaries and our overhead and our electricity. And with the switch, with the pivot to a lot of PPP applications, were you able to still make your goals? 56%, John. What do you think about that number?
I'm glad to see it, number one.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm not surprised because overall bank profitability has held up fairly nice in the recession.
Tell us about this. Your articles on PPP, big banks, tap breaks, and SBA lending. What was your thinking about why you wanted to cover this, and why is this an important story?
Well, the thing that surprised me was we looked at some really big, I guess what you call top 10 or close to top 10 lenders. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And the trend that surprised me out of that was that for many of them, obviously, a couple bucked the trend, and Live Oak is mentioned there. For many of them, they saw declines in volume, but the declines were they outstripped the program's rate of decline. I mean, you would have thought that for these big lenders, maybe they would have endured a sort of a single digit decline in volume, but for all the ones we looked at, the declines were double digit, fairly significant. I don't mean not all of them were just 11 and 12. Some got to 30 and 44 into the 50. And that did surprise me. And talking to them anecdotally, we made fairly obvious correlation, but still was interesting that they can't do everything, they can't be all things to all people, and the focus on PPP caused regular 7A to suffer.
John, 2021, do you see those numbers rebounding? Do you see them increasing? I mean, that's an unfair question. We don't know where we are in PPP 2.0. I'm still optimistic there will be some sort of stimulus. It may not happen until, it's not going to happen by tomorrow, but.
I see them over a full year of 2021 rebounding, and maybe rebounding significantly strongly. It depends on, what policy mix Congress decides on. I think you're right. There's going to be some stimulus. Hopefully it will come between the election and the inauguration of President X, whoever that may be. But hopefully it will come soon. But it's going to come. It's going to come. And I guess the question will be, beyond PPP, presumably there will be some PPP in it. What will they do with 7A? And more and more people are calling for reduced fees or perhaps no fees for a time temporarily and a higher guarantee level. And that sounds familiar. It's because that's what the government did following the financial crisis. It worked then. I don't see why it wouldn't work again. Worked very well. And people I've talked to in putting that story together, and I sort of saved their comments for another story, they indicated they'd rather see that than a PPP, a new PPP, that they really would like to see the government focus on the traditional permanent programs to fine-tune them and really make them very attractive, in this,
I assume that means lower fees and higher guarantee percentages.
Exactly. They prefer that over a third round of PPP.
Well, obviously, this is a moving target. I think we are all in agreement something's going to happen. Right. We've all been burned. I've been burned on speculating, so I will leave it at something will happen. I think we're all in that bucket of thought, but we're not about to say what exactly is going to happen. Is that a fair enough assessment of the panel?
Absolutely, but I'm with John.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, John. I'm with John 100%. I think most lenders, if you took the traditional 7A product and you bumped the guarantee up to, let's say, 90%. I know everybody would love to have it at 100, but let's say you bump the guarantee up to 90%.
I think 90%. Yeah.
You would see a huge increase in SBA lending volume in 2021 with a move like that. So our SBA friends that are on the call, please take this back to headquarters. Tell them we need 90% guarantee.
And
yes, be a good SBA citizen. That's exactly right.
There you go, and lobby for the program. Katie, you're awfully quiet, but we keep on reading these statistics. What's going on? Who put out this report? Go ahead. Tell us about small business banking satisfaction reaches record high. How in the world could that be happening?
Well, you are seeing this. I've seen this reported several times now, and what's interesting about this is you're getting the majority of this is coming from the PPP, and since that program has ended, you are seeing a little bit of a lull, but it is still record high satisfaction, especially with borrowers who receive larger loans. They're seeing a higher correlation with that. Borrowers who receive very large PPP loans are saying they are extremely satisfied, but even the ones who receive smaller ones, you're seeing a lot of satisfaction. So it means the program did its job, at least to an extent, and a lot of people are really pushing to continue the program if it's working as well as it did.
Katie, who did this study?
I don't know this study.
Okay.
City Power.
Do those numbers surprise you, John?
No, and I think what I'd like to do, and what I've been thinking about doing, is taking this from the from the universal snapshot here, and trying to be granular, going to a number of banks. There were any number of banks that talked about their hopes for taking PPP and using it as a sort of as a marketing tool to add and deepen relationships with the businesses that they brought on. As a result of there were so many banks that made loans to their customer base first, and then way beyond that in PPP. And I'm sure that's what banks are trying to do, but I'd like to get an idea of how they're doing it, how they're doing at it.
I'm shocked, not shocked. I never thought about it, but that 1/3 percentage of small business banking customers getting a PPP loan, that's pretty high numbered, in my opinion.
Right. The other question is, what has it done for the community banking industry in terms of its market share? You have to think that it's helped. The community banks, community financial institutions have a chance to really step up their game as a result.
Well, I know you're talking to a lot more than I am. The ones I talk to, the core deposits are going up.
Right.
Their management is comfortable with the program. There's certainly, while there's a lot of issues on how to process this, management isn't too concerned that they're going to be holding losses out there. So it's they're supportive of the program. And as you said, it'll be interesting to follow this. Katie, is this the PayNet study, the next one, Strategic Insights? Is that what we're talking about here?
Yes.
PayNet, go ahead, Katie.
Yeah, the interesting thing here is that small business lending has been increasing ever so slightly over the past couple of months. But it's really not that much higher than over a year ago. That's really probably the biggest take after this, is that it's really lending is back to about where it would be expected.
Yeah. John, and what's interesting about this is what PayNet does. When they talk about delinquencies, they're talking about entire small business debt. So they're talking about vendor debt, and they obviously bank debt, but they are also talking about all debt involved with that. Speaking of Georgia, are we going to hear an announcement while we're on the show, Katie? I know you're glancing over at your screen for that.
I've been looking, and I am not seeing anything yet.
Not yet. All right. Love the doing this just in, but supposedly they're going to, what did they say? They were going to announce it immediately? Is that what they said, John?
I heard midday, but midday.
Midday. There you go. All right. We have a couple fraud stories that we don't have room for our Fraud Friday, Katie, so go ahead and present them.
Well, this is just our Fraud Friday, and I'll, of course, go into more of it tomorrow. This is a former Bank of America client relationship manager who just recently pled guilty to embezzling $1.5 million from his clients and using those funds to buy a Porsche SUV and also various luxury goods. I don't think it's listed. I'm pretty sure he got an iPhone and some
Apple
jewelry and things like that as well. So
yeah, I just these frauds. You never read about a fraud, Lance, where they steal the money. Oh, let's invest it all in Amazon.
Well, you never hear a story about something. You always hear the people that get caught are the ones that go out and buy $200,000 cars and expensive watches, and they start spending the money left and right. Every one of these fraud stories involves somebody buying a nice car or taking a big trip or doing something stupid.
Yeah, and not to pick on the younger generation, but I believe Mr. Ollie was only 31 at the time. What are the two other stories that you have, Katie, that we're not going to be publishing?
I haven't really gone over them yet. I think we'll probably hold them over for tomorrow's show.
That's fine. We can do that. Philip asked a question. When an existing PP loan is forgiven but left with a remaining balance, what happens, Lance?
Well, I think that it would be appropriate to re-amortize the remaining balance, as Philip has asked, and I think this is one of the big secret areas that SBA needs to give us some guidance on. Right now, my assumption is any PPP remaining balance, the servicing SOP, the 5057-2 is what will govern it. So that remaining balance, I would encourage the possibility of re-amortizing it so they can handle the payment. Ideally, even in PPP, the ideal thing is to get repaid. And so accepting an early payoff on a PPP loan is perfectly acceptable. And the answer is choosing to take a servicing action, whether you want to re-amortize it or not, although I encourage you to look at the possibility of helping them repay the loan by taking appropriate servicing actions, but you don't have to. Now, guys, that's based on what's in the 5057-2. SBA could come out with some guidance on servicing the remaining balances of PPP loans between now and the end of the year that may change that response. But right now, I'd say yes. Consider the possibility of re-amortizing it on not 2 or 5 years, but whatever remains in that 2 or 5 year period. And an early payoff is a great thing.
With respect to our Coleman professional nominations, if you plan on nominating someone but just I don't have time to do a couple paragraphs on it, just send Katie or I an email. Katie's at Caitlin, I believe, at ColemanReport.com, and send it to me and just say, hey, I'm going to nominate someone. Can I have a couple extra days to get that in? The answer is, of course. But we want to acknowledge the professionals in our industry very much. We have some cool webinars. Lance talks about his on Tuesday. Thursday, we're doing our hospitality webinar and putting that together. And finally, our top 10, we're going to release that today on the top 10 things your board and C-suite needs to know. John, I appreciate your time very much. Great insight. The world may change by next Thursday, correct? Can we even go with that prediction?
That's safe to say.
That's safe to say. All right. Katie, Lance, thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today for Coleman Report Live and for supporting America's Main Street, one entrepreneur at a time.
Thank you.
Have a great afternoon.